What's up, everybody? It's the Power Rankings Podcast, aka the Power Rankings Show. Are you jamming, dude? Are you
of course.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. That voice, of course, is the recognizable dulcet tones of at Marcus_Mosher. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. If you're watching this on Brinks or on YouTube, I'm glad that we had our window shifted and I'm on now the left-hand side. You're on the right-hand side. Just a little change in scenery here. So I take the number one spot, Top Gun.
Yeah. So we'll put Am I Wolf Man? What was ICE's nav called? Who was ICE's goose? Was it Wolfman?
I'm looking it up right now. Slider.
Slider. Yeah, Slider was the yeah. I think Slider was the dude that I talked about before that was in Terminator. He was Sarah Connor's roommate's boyfriend. Don't make me bust you up, man. All right. Yeah, good start to our podcast. I'm Elliot Harrison. Obviously, if you are in Texas, I know a lot of our listeners are in Texas. I hope you are staying off the roads. The word is treacherous and it is applicable out there. Even walking right now, it doesn't look dangerous, but it is falling. It's icy. So if you can stay home, please stay home and listen to our podcast. There's an idea. Well, obviously you are listening to our podcast if you hear me right now, so it's kind of redundant. A lot of big news in the NFL today, which I didn't know. I was working on a project and also I was charging all my stuff up, worried that the power was going to go out. And Marcus called me and said, big news day today. And holy cow. Wow. So where do you want to start?
Oh man, so many big things. Is it Tom Brady? Is it D'Amico Ryans? Is it just Sean Payton? Is it Michael Gallup getting another knee surgery? Whatever. It doesn't matter to me.
I knew you were going to say that. Well, obviously, Tom Brady, the headliner today. And I got to tell you, my reaction was one of surprise because there's been massive speculation. One from you that he was going to the Raiders. The consensus, I would say, the last 5 days or so has been that Tom Brady would end up on the 49ers, that it made too much sense, especially with Brock Purdy going to be out for what could be a calendar year. We'll have to see on that. Obviously, Brock Purdy is going to have Tommy John surgery. He is a really young man, though. Brock Purdy just turned 23. Typically, your recovery of those kinds of injuries is much quicker, which, by the way, is another news item since we did our last podcast. Yep. And a big news item. But in reference to Tom Brady, Marcus, does it feel what a tee up?
Yep.
Does it feel like to you that this is a little bit of an anticlimactic given all the kind of applause for his career last off season when we thought he was retiring and then he kind of had the year that he had, that this doesn't quite feel the same?
Yeah, it feels to me like Brady ran out of good options and he was looking around at some of the other teams, looking at his current team, Tampa Bay, and it's like, you know what? Probably the best option right now is to retire, because let's go through it really quickly. You look at Tampa Bay situation, that roster's old. There's $60 million over the cap. It's not happening, right?
No.
The other option was to potentially go play in Miami, which was the plan last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Dolphins recommitted to Tua, and Tua actually got cleared from the concussion protocol today. So I think that's off the table. There was a report that he wanted to play with Sean Payton, who just got hired by the Broncos, which we'll talk about that in a second. They obviously have their quarterback. So the options are like, do I go play for the Raiders and be the third or fourth best quarterback in that division and playing against Patrick Mahomes? Or do I just retire and kind of go out go out now while I'm healthy? I just made the playoffs. Why not?
One of the tricky things, if we just kind of isolate the 49ers for a moment, I think what a lot of fans were thinking and a lot of people were thinking, Marcus, is that, look, this is a weak conference right now, not just division, but who are the stellar quarterbacks in the NFC? You've got less than five. Right now you look across the landscape and who you really putting your finger on? Hurts, Cousins, Prescott, maybe Rodgers. We don't even know that Rodgers, what he's going to be. And Stafford's career is, I don't want to say up in the air. He says he's coming back, but the problem is an athlete knows when he can't do some of the things that he used to do anymore. And the other part of this is, do you want to go play when you aren't yourself for your childhood team? Do you want to go and possibly stink up the joint for the team you loved your whole life as a kid that made you want to play football in the first place? Because Tom Brady there's photos of Tom Brady with Joe Montana jersey on. People think those things don't matter. They do. They do. Athletes have a lot of pride. I speculated to you last year, and I want your thought on this. When they played the Rams in the playoff game, I was already questioning Tom Brady's arm strength. I saw flashes this year, like the game was at Carolina late in the year where he hit Mike Evans for a couple of deep balls, and it looked pretty good. But if you can't throw it outside the numbers with velocity, even though so much of the game is played over the middle of the field now, you still have to be able to make that throw. Do you think that factors in here at all?
Maybe partly, but I do want people to remember, like, one of his last throws for Tampa Bay was in the Cowboy playoff game. He threw just a beautiful pass down the sideline to Mike Evans, who kind of dropped it, right?
Yeah.
Which would have been an awesome touchdown. So, I mean, I think it's clear his arm isn't the same as it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, but it's certainly good enough to be a good quarterback in the NFL.
Did a part of you secretly kind of want to see that ball completed to Mike Evans for a touchdown? Or no?
Not at all.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was just wondering.
I was already nervous as it was. The score was what, 31-9 or whatever, and I was still worried about it.
Yeah. Just a couple other things here on this kind of retirement angle. Was it Troy Aikman in that game that was talking about trying to get rid of the ball too quickly to not get hit?
Yeah. He basically said you can't play scared. Yeah.
It's really easy for people to assume that, oh, well, Troy's just, jealous that, Brady's better or has more Super Bowl rings or whatever. I think every quarterback would acknowledge that Tom Brady's the greatest ever, but they all know when that wall hits. The wall doesn't always, you're smirking, so I know you got something to unleash on me, but
go ahead. I'm listening.
Marcus, I guess what I'm saying is the wall doesn't necessarily have to hit by a lack of arm strength.
Yeah.
Or, for example, if you're a receiver, a lack of speed, sometimes it's want to. How much do you want to get hit anymore? And it's great to have a quick release, but if you're getting rid of the ball so fast that you're not able to run certain plays in your offense or let routes develop, like the slower crossing routes, that can be evidence of hitting the wall mentally, no?
So I think we've seen over the last 4, 5, 6 years that Brady just wasn't going to take any unnecessary hits in the regular season. But when it came to the playoffs, like I think about the Bronco AFC Championship game, was that 2015?
Yes.
He got clobbered in that game. He was standing in the pocket, taking hits. And even up till a couple of years ago, he was still in the playoffs, standing tall in the pocket. When you don't want to even take a hit in a playoff game, things are kind of declining fast. And that's what it looked like in the Cowboy game, that he was just terrified of any kind of contact.
Since we're talking about his career here, when people think of the Brady connection with a receiver, it's hard because he's played with so many different guys. But I think the first guy that comes to mind is Brady to Moss in 2007, because they had that crazy year where Brady threw 50 touchdowns. Moss had 23, the last of which looked like a walk in the park, 50-yard touchdown. You remember that play? Literally, it looked like Randy Moss was jogging. It was against the Giants on like a Sunday night.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, they would play in the Super Bowl like a month later. But I think of the 2015 AFC Championship. I think of a loss. The connection between, I looked up that game last night for something I was working on, and Gronk caught 8 balls for 144 yards in that game.
The 4th and 10 throw that Brady had to Gronk when they're down by 8 with less than 2 minutes left, I still think is the best throw that I've ever seen from Brady. I actually tweeted it out this morning. You should go check it out. But it's just, man, to be able to make that throw in a double coverage with your season on the line, unbelievable.
It really is. It really is. And Brady to Gronk in Super Bowl 53, the seam route against the Rams, that it wasn't a touchdown, but it put them in position. It got them down, I want to say, like inside the 5. It was a great pitch and catch. And as good as Mahomes to Kelce is, Mahomes to Kelce's been more prolific, at least from a receptions and yards standpoint, not a touchdown standpoint. It's not better to me than Brady to Gronk. It's equal, but not better. Because if it's 3rd and 5 and it's a championship game, I want Brady to Gronk just as much as I want Montana to Rice or Mahomes to Kelce.
We should also throw like Peyton to Marvin Harrison and Kyle Orton, Brandon Lloyd. I mean, all those elite combos.
Hey man, for about 12 games in the 2000, was that 09?
I think so. 09. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I have one last Brady thought before we move on.
By the way, you guys, all of y'all could get Marcus and I on a 1-minute tangent on Brandon Lloyd's ridiculous catches. At the snap of a finger, we'll lose our train of thought. So go ahead.
First of all, we don't really need to say anything more about Brady's career. It's the greatest ever. Nobody's ever going to be able to replicate it. As somebody who's not had a lot of personal success when it comes to football in my career, having the Cowboys be the last team to beat Tom Brady is pretty cool. That's all. Hang the banner, Jerry Jones.
Yeah. Well, they acted like it in the owner's suite. You know what I thought was funny is when Jalen Ramsey tweeted last year after Brady retired that, oh man, his last touchdown was on me, with kind of the laughing emoji. Yeah. Because remember he beat Ramsey on that deep ball to who was that to? Was that to Evans also?
It was to Evans. It was an awesome throw. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. To try and get back in that game. What's the one thing before we get off Brady? If you had to pick one stat, one moment, one kind of pelt on the wall, what's the one that sticks out to you for Tom Brady?
12-4 in his career against the Steelers.
Well played.
I mean, that's honestly, I'm kind of joking, but I loved how pumped up Brady got to play a couple teams. The Steelers and Jets were the two of them, right? He just got so fired up. And it seemed like on those days, you knew you're getting the best version of Brady. So I always like to see a Brady that was super amped up.
For me, I think it's the number of conference championship games. Yeah. So from 2011 to 2018, they made the AFC championship every single year. Brady in his career, let's say they're the 3 Super Bowls, plus he made it in 2006. That's when the Colts had that crazy comeback in the second half. 2007, they made the Super Bowl. So that's 5 right there. Okay. Then you've got the 8 in a row. That's 13. And then you've got the Tampa. So you're talking about 14 conference championship game appearances. Just to give you an idea, first of all, that's longer than most great NFL players' entire careers.
Yeah. I got one thing I want to ask you really quickly before Brady, before we move on. Do you think if you separated his career into 3 parts, his 20s, his 30s, and 40s, he's a Hall of Famer in all 3 of those? Because we obviously the 20s, right? Because he wins 3 Super Bowls. The 30s, because that's when he starts the 2007 start all the way to 2016. He's got the MVP. He's got, the Super Bowl in there. 2017 to 2022 is his 40s. 2017, they lose in the Super Bowl to the Philly, right?
He throws for 500 yards.
Yep. They win the Super Bowl. Was it 2018 with Atlanta? Yep. Mm-hmm. And then 2020, they win the Super Bowl with Tampa. In just his 40s, okay, he threw 193 touchdowns for 27,000 yards.
Yeah. How many interceptions?
50 or 60.
Yeah. So over a 3-to-1 ratio. Let's also not forget 2019 playoff appearance, 2021 playoff appearance,
2022 playoffs.
Yeah, 2022 playoffs. So that was a bad team. So he didn't miss the playoffs in his 40s. It's pretty remarkable. The thing I was going to say about the 14 years is I'm pretty sure Tom Landry coached the Cowboys to 14 championship games in his entire coaching career. which is one of the legendary careers of all time. And Tom Brady did that as a quarterback.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. So that always sticks out to me. But either way, great career. We're not going to spend the whole podcast on Tom Brady. We'll probably talk about him a little bit more as things come up, which also is an appropriate time for me to tease our podcast later this week that Marcus doesn't think we're going to do. Just kidding. I saw the look. Marcus like, wait, what podcast? But our next podcast that we're going to do, we need to talk Hall of Fame because we've got the Hall of Fame coming up. So I want you to kind of give me your predictions for that. And obviously Tom Brady's going to have his 5-year waiting period, which means that he will be a shoe-in for the class of 2028. You'll have Tom Brady in there with some other guys, but maybe Aaron Donald will retire, and it'll be Watt, Donald, and Brady.
Can I guarantee you what's going to happen? Not happening now. There's no way Aaron Rodgers is retiring now. He does not want to be upstaged by Tom Brady at the Hall of Fame. So I'm going to report it now. Rodgers is not retiring. Everybody, he's coming back.
Yeah. So I have a question on Brady in the Hall of Fame for the end of our podcast. I want to get to the other two big news items. Let's start with the Broncos because really they're involved with both of these guys. So they had a deal, you were telling me, in place with DeMeco Ryans, but
at least they thought so.
At least they thought so. I had some thoughts on that, but it ends up that Sean Payton takes the job. So let's start with DeMeco Ryans. So if he left them at the altar, he takes the Texans job. He gets a 6-year deal, which is a heck of a long deal. What do you think of that? Do you think that Ryans made the right decision? Because I think a lot of people would say, wait a minute. You got a great defense in place. You're a defensive-minded coach. You got a veteran quarterback. Why the heck are you taking Houston, who doesn't even have the top overall pick and doesn't have a quarterback?
First of all, I think DeMeco Ryans learned from Kyle Shanahan, who took a 6-year deal with the 49ers, that, hey, take long deals so that way you can have time to do the rebuild, right? You don't want to rush things. And the 49ers, for the most part, did a pretty good job those first couple of years. They weren't great, but eventually they built this team up to be a perennial powerhouse. DeMeco taking a 6-year deal at Houston, especially after how the last 3 coaches have went in Houston, right? With David Culley, and then this year with Lovie Smith, get some job security there. But I think it's a perfect fit. You know that I generally don't love hiring defensive-minded head coaches, but I think in this case, this one makes a ton of sense. I think you bring in a former player who everybody loves, who is so well respected around the league. I think this is a home run signing for Houston.
Right, former player for that franchise. Not just a former player. Going to the other side of this, him spurning the Broncos?
Sure.
Yeah. Do you think any of that? Because in my mind, do I want to take that job? Do I want to take a job where I've heard all this about Russell Wilson and he's kind of above the team? And maybe I found out through talking to players that a lot of that was overblown, which would be great. But let's pretend for a moment that it wasn't. Is that a job you necessarily want to take if you're a DeMeco Ryans? You're a defensive-minded guy. You really want to have the quarterback's office down the hall from you?
I thought you were going to ask me like personally, or me like as DeMeco Ryans, because if you're asking me personally, sure, $85 million to go live in Denver for a few years, great, sign me up. If you're DeMeco, though, I get why it doesn't make sense. They have a lot of the defensive pieces that you could turn that unit into a juggernaut right away, but you're stuck at quarterback, right? And you don't have a choice. Like Russell Wilson is going to be your quarterback for the next several years. I think DeMeco is going to love having the choice of, okay, do we want to trade for a veteran? Do we want to sign a veteran? Do we want to just draft somebody that we love? You could see why that Houston job was so much more appealing. Plus, not only do they have the number 2 pick in this draft, they've got the number 12 pick. They've got Cleveland's first-round pick next year as well. And they got all this cap space. So it's really an ideal situation.
I think there's one other thing. I always like to talk about that these guys are not just, names on a page or names on the internet, that these are people that have the exact same feelings and ego as everybody else out there. And if I'm DeMeco Ryans, you look at the Broncos, are you really going to have any kind of legacy there?
Heck no.
I mean, let's say you win a Super Bowl. Gary Kubiak won a Super Bowl, right? Mike Shanahan won too.
Gary Kubiak won a Super Bowl. It's not even the most famous coach in that staff, right? I think people give Wade Phillips more credit than Gary Kubiak.
Yeah. And then you have Wade Phillips was actually a head coach for the Broncos in 93 and 94. You have a quarterback, former quarterback there that's really the face of that franchise. This isn't a deal like John Lynch, where John Lynch played for Tampa and people think of him as a buck. And I think people just kind of think of John Lynch as like, yeah, he's GM for the 49ers for now, but they'll always think of John Lynch as part of those Bucs teams. When you think Broncos, you think John Elway, for better or for worse. And so,
or Brandon
you go to Houston, or Brandon Lloyd. So who are you thinking of when you think of Houston? Andre Johnson?
I mean, JJ Watt's probably the first.
JJ Watt?
Right.
Yeah.
But DeMeco's not,
Johnson.
But DeMeco's not far down. Right. And if he has success, like, I'm not even saying like a Super Bowl success, but let's say he gets his team back to being competent. They win a couple AFC South titles over the next couple of years, and they're always around 9 to 10 wins. He's going to be thought of as one of the most important people in the franchise history, even though it hasn't been around that long. So I think it's just perfect for both sides. I absolutely love this hiring.
Do you think it's bad that I think of Andre Johnson first when I think of the Texans?
No. Why?
Should it be JJ Watt that I think of first? I guess it should. I like them both.
Andre Johnson should be a Hall of Famer.
Great player, really great player. Going to who the Broncos did hire. This is our third major piece of news. Sean Payton. Obviously, what you're referring to. I thought this was unusual. I understood DeMeco Ryans going to Houston. I don't know about Sean Payton going to the Broncos. I don't know. I know money is a big deal, but Sean Payton's got plenty of it. And I guarantee if Fox would have paid him pretty nice money to hang out and do TV work with them.
Does Sean Payton fit with Russell Wilson?
Not in my mind. No.
I mean, I know the easy thing to say as well. He had Drew Brees, who was a shorter quarterback, and look how much success they had. First of all, you're talking about totally different styles of quarterbacks, and you're playing in a dome rather than playing outdoors in what looks to be the hardest division in football. I don't know, man. I don't know.
The first thing I would do with Russell Wilson, let's just throw out all the ancillary crap about the office and the parking spaces and the, whatever he got, orange Hostess cupcakes instead of chocolate ones were made,
that would be a red flag right there.
Yeah. Oh, I disagree wholeheartedly. You don't like the orange Hostess cupcakes?
Compared to chocolate? Are you crazy?
No.
That's a red flag.
That is not a red flag. You are false as usual. I think I would tell Russell Wilson to lose weight. And I'm not saying he's fat. It's not what this is about, but he's a stocky guy. And as you get older as an NFL player, number one, it doesn't age your quickness. Number two, he's stockier than he used to be when he was running around. And number three, lifting weights, if that's really why Russell is as big as he is, in other words, if it's not eating, if it's because he's heavy lifting, look at the Tom Brady method, because I think that works. And I'm not even talking from a football sense. The older you get, the less you want to be bulked up and the more you want more like sinewy, kind of elongated muscles for flexibility. It helps you against injury. I'm not going to get super deep dive into, Tybo here. I don't know why I just said Tybo. Did you do Tybo, Billy Blanks, like DVDs?
Did Taekwondo.
Okay, cool.
Not really. I didn't do that either.
In Amish country, you guys were doing the Taekwondo classes.
What's the 80s guy? Richard Simmons?
Norris. Yeah, Richard Simmons. You did Richard Simmons?
My grandma did. We just had the VHS tapes downstairs.
Richard Simmons, great guy. But you understand what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
Like
you want to be limber, right? Like
you want to be limber.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at Dak. Dak has lost size. I even think Drew Brees kind of trimmed up late in his career.
Partly because Brady's talked about this too. Like when you get hit and you get sacked, you basically want to turn like loose, right? You want to be flexible and turn
Gumby.
basically like into a noodle, right?
Yes.
Because where you get hurt is if you try to tense up and absorb the contact. That's when you pull stuff and you get injured.
Yes. I think that's the first place that I would go. And I look, I'm not a quarterback coach. I'm merely saying that, to me, eyeball test. Did Russell Wilson look quick to you last year?
No,
getting out of the pocket?
No.
Does he look big to you?
Yes.
Those, just doing that alone might make him a little bit quicker, a little bit more elusive, and also protect him from injury and help out his arm. So that's my thought.
I agree. Sean Payton's got to figure out the Russell Wilson thing. Like, that's the reason he's hired, is to get Russell to play like an elite quarterback. I don't know if that's possible anymore. I do think he'll get him to play better next year, but man, obviously Payton's still a good coach. I just think giving up draft assets, giving up a first round pick and more to go get Sean Payton seems not smart to me.
Who do you hire as DC?
Some talk that Vic Fangio might come back.
I would love that. I'll give you a wild one just for fun. This is really half serious, but get Wade out of retirement. Why not?
I think Wade's doing some USFL stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Doggone it. I was going to say, run it back. Do you know Wade was once interim head coach for the New Orleans Saints? There's a fun fact for you. That was
bring Rob Ryan back
years ago. I'm going to go ahead and go with Vic Fangio on that one.
That's a better call.
Yeah. I don't know who else would be out there. I know Dean Pease is dealing with health stuff. He just retired from the Atlanta Falcons.
If they want to wait like a year, they could have Dennis Allen.
I knew there was going to be some snarky remark out there about that. I was just trying to think of maybe a name that we haven't heard in a while. Obviously Jim Schwartz recently got a job. But yeah, I love the idea. There's an interesting call. But hey, Vic Fangio coming back would be a lot of fun given the way that played out, and that defense played their butts off for him. So I would love that. Maybe Sean Payton really accrues a really, how about I say really one more time, veteran staff.
And that's the appeal, right? He's got so many connections in the league. He probably is going to be able to build a better staff right away than DeMeco Ryans.
That's exactly what Dick Vermeil did when he came back into coaching with the Rams in 1997. They had a super veteran staff, starting, I think, with Jim Hanifan at offensive line coach. And Mike Martz was not one of those guys. He was more of a younger offensive coordinator, but it worked out pretty well for them. They won a Super Bowl. Okay, so we've got our Sean Payton, we got our DeMeco Ryans. I'm just, from your attitude, I'm going to assume you like the DeMeco Ryans hire in Houston better than the Sean Payton hire with the Broncos. Am I right? Or
all day.
No?
Yes, all day. Yeah, I'm not even sure it's all that close.
Yeah. Then again, Sean Payton, he's got the skins on the wall himself. So he certainly, you have to trust that he's going to know what he's doing there. I guess I was just a little more surprised on that. Yeah. But I want to circle back to Tom Brady here for a second, because we know Tom Brady's going to go to the Hall of Fame. He's going to walk right in. I'm curious because I got asked this the other night by Eagles fan who yelled at me for not saying that the Eagles absolutely were dominant on Sunday. I just wanted someone to consider that the other team literally didn't have a guy that could throw a ball. He asked me who right now in the NFL is a certifiable Hall of Famer that's active. Certifiable. No questions asked. What's that?
I like this. Let's do it.
So just kind of off the top, thinking obviously Tom Brady 1. I would say Rodgers 2.
Mm-hmm.
Donald 3.
Mm-hmm.
Watt 4.
Yep.
What are you thinking so far?
I think those are all locks. No, I think all those guys are first ballot Hall of Famers, but they are without a doubt all Hall of Famers. I would add in Patrick Mahomes.
Yes.
Travis Kelce.
Yes.
Trent Williams.
Yes.
Zach Martin.
Yes.
And then it gets tough. Jason Peters.
Yes,
Tyron Smith.
I think so, but I would rank him third among the tackles that you just named.
I agree.
I've got there's a couple that I think you can.
Jason Kelce.
I was just about to say Jason Kelce. Then
Von
you start
Miller.
to get, yeah, oh yeah, Von Miller. That's the one the other night when I was talking to him. That's the guy I forgot. Von Miller's going to break dance in the Hall of Fame, bro. But that's a first ballot. He would be above the guys you just named.
Yep,
like,
of course,
I'd put him over everyone you just named except for maybe Trent Williams. I don't know that I would put him over Trent Williams. But you're splitting hairs there, and then you start to get into a little bit tougher territory. So I'm going to throw out a couple of names to you, and just tell me if you're leaning that way. Patrick Peterson had a renaissance this year.
No.
Okay, Jalen Ramsey.
I think it depends how the next 3 years go, but I would lean no.
Julio Jones.
Yes, but it's going to take a while.
This is a really tough one. Okay. Derrick Henry.
No.
I just want to add a caveat to that. If Derrick Henry didn't get hurt last year, he was going to run for about 2,000 yards again.
Yeah, he was.
Yep. If he ran for 2,000 yards and never gained a yard in the NFL again, I'd have voted for him for the Hall of Fame.
I agree. I got a couple more for you.
Yeah, keep going.
Justin Tucker.
Yes.
Matthew Without Slater. Question.
I don't think you can. I mean, if you're not going to put Steve Tasker in, how do you put Matthew Slater in? Steve Tasker was my generation shoot, dude, he made so many big plays. It's kind of crazy. I think that's a much more borderline guy. A few other borderline guys in my mind, Fletcher Cox. Really good career. Is it enough?
I'd say no.
The running back position is the one that there's not going to really be any guys, I think, that are active. I thought of Derrick Henry. Adrian Peterson obviously is retired. Adrian Peterson is definitely going to the Hall of Fame. But the running back position, it's kind of skimpy. And wide receiver is going to be a tough gig too. I mean, how do you feel about Devontae Adams?
He would need to have probably 3 more seasons like he had this year for me to seriously consider it.
You may not believe this, but I'll tell you a guy that's going to get major consideration for the Hall of Fame, because when it's all said and done, a lot of those voters look at numbers. How are you going to keep Mike Evans out of the Hall of Fame?
Because I'm not sure Mike Evans was ever a top 3 receiver in any year that he played.
Agreed. But do you know how many guys are in the Hall of Fame that I don't know that Bob Greasy was ever a top 3 quarterback? I don't know that Art Monk might've been a top 3 wide receiver for a year or two. But when you have a guy that starts his first 9 years of his career with over 1,000 yards and no one's ever done that before, just the fact that he stayed healthy, right? Like Keenan Allen hasn't been able to stay on the field. You could argue Keenan Allen was maybe a better player than Mike Evans, at least early on. I don't think that that's a wild argument.
I've got one more for you.
Okay.
Justin Houston.
I thought about him, and I just don't think it's going to be enough, because I think there are too many guys that have around the same sack numbers he does. But I will tell you, Hall voters love sacks. They love sacks. That's why Jason Taylor got in on his first try, which I didn't really agree with. But there we are. Khalil Mack.
No, I don't think the last couple of years have been good enough.
There are a few guys that if they even keep this up for a couple of more years, it's going to be tough to keep them out. TJ Watt, Nick Bosa. When you are, it's one thing to be mentioned in the top, hey, was he a top 3 or 4 guy? It's another thing when you are a top guy. So that's why I think league MVPs should always get a lot of consideration.
Sure.
Obviously, I'm not going to go on Hall of Fame with Lamar Jackson, but it's too early. But he did win an MVP. I was just more curious. I think another difficult one is Matt Stafford. I don't think Matt Stafford's a Hall of Famer.
I don't. I mean, if he has like another Super Bowl run in him and he's healthy for the next 3 years, think it's a little different, but not as it is.
Matt Ryan?
No.
The other position that doesn't really get mentioned enough is the safety position. Is there any safety in the league right now that you think's a Hall of Fame player?
Not yet, but Minkah Fitzpatrick is trending that way.
Off the ball linebacker is really tough, but I think Bobby Wagner should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think he's going to be. I think he'll make the Hall of Fame eventually.
If he makes, like, if he has another all pro season next year and then another Pro Bowl year after that, why not?
I think Bobby Wagner is a Hall of Famer right now.
I agree with you. But if
he's played 11 years,
you get to a point where you have 7 or 8 all pro nominations. You're too good to be left out.
Before we get off this topic, I want to ask you about one guy that's retired.
Okay.
And how you feel about it. Luke Kuechly.
No, I didn't play long enough. And if we're not, I think Patrick Willis was better than Luke Kuechly. And if we're not going to consider Willis, then I don't think we can consider Kuechly.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
I think Luke Kuechly is, I'm one of those guys. Look, I love you too. I'm glad that they've had over 30 years, 40 years now of success. But I'm also a Guns N' Roses guy. And Guns N' Roses was only together for 8 years, but the crescendo early in their career was insane. And I would argue Guns N' Roses crescendo was greater than U2's was. If a guy is the best player at his position for 3 or 4 years, hands down, I don't know that Willis was better than Kuechly. I think they're pretty even. Let's just pretend you're right. Who's better than Willis?
At linebacker?
Yeah.
I'd say Bobby Wagner.
I would not. I can't go with you there. I think Kuechly was at the top of the class.
But I would take Wagner's career over Willis or Kuechly's career.
I just know what Kuechly did, like in 13, 14, and 15. He played out of his mind. In 15, he was the best linebacker in football. Willis retired in 14 after 14 when he got banged up. NaVorro Bowman, by the way, phenomenal off the ball backer. Sean Lee could have been one of these guys.
Yeah.
Couldn't stay healthy.
I blocked that 2015 season out of my memory for various reasons.
One thing I'd like it if you would, because I've noticed you've been tweeting some highlights. You actually sent out the best tweet of your entire career right before we recorded this podcast. And I'm really proud of you for that. The Roy Green, everybody go look at that tweet. But I was so busy about to bust you that I don't even remember what I was going to say anymore.
So I was going to say, so you'd take 6 years of like Patrick Willis over a 30-year career like Mercedes Lewis?
First of all, Patrick Willis played 8 years, if you must know. And when you and I went over the semifinalists, if you ask me who I think should be in the Hall of Fame, Patrick Willis should already be in the Hall of Fame. I don't care if he played 8 years. This is the question I asked Marcus a few weeks ago, and then we will get off the Hall of Fame topic. But I asked you, if Julio Jones wasn't a Hall of Famer in, say, 2018, then why is he all of a sudden a Hall of Famer now just because he's added some numbers? If I were to say to you, hey, Marcus, do you think that Julio Jones has been a Hall of Fame level player or even an all Pro Bowl? Has Julio Jones even been a Pro Bowl player from 2018 to 2022?
I think there's 1 year in there that was good. So no.
Okay. So if a guy you think had a borderline Hall of Fame career up until 2018, and then you don't even think he's been a Pro Bowler at all since then, does the fact that they've added stats to their resume, should that make them Hall of Famer?
No.
That's why I'm okay with Julio Jones, by the way, because Julio Jones crescendo was phenomenal. So this is more using Julio Jones as an embodiment of this argument. The point I'm making is, if these guys are making it, if Frank Gore makes it because he added all these numbers, then why shouldn't the Priest Holmes and the Luke Kuechlys make it for being the best player at their position?
Derrick Henry is a better running back than Frank Gore. He's just never going to put up the stats that Frank Gore did, right?
Yeah. And I would argue, this may be unpopular, I think Priest Holmes is a better back than Derrick Henry.
No, I don't think that's controversial. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Well, you're a big time fantasy guy. So I bet you when you were getting into fantasy, Priest Holmes probably went like number one in every draft.
So when I played fantasy, that was back in the early 2000s. The rule was if you had the number one pick, you also didn't get a second round pick because Priest Holmes was that much more valuable. So you had to give up your second round pick to draft him.
Oh gosh, that's not fair. I don't think I could do that.
But go look how much better Priest Holmes was than any other player for like a 3-year stretch.
Oh, I know, dude. His 2002 year when he only played 14 games is unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. That said, those are my thoughts on the Hall of Fame. We'll talk about that a little bit on our next podcast. On Monday night, we usually podcast, and we're going to talk a little bit about the actual guys that are being considered that are going to be voted on the weekend of the Super Bowl. What is your final thought, sir?
Started with Tom Brady. I need to end with Tom Brady really quickly because there's some media news that we need to talk about. If you remember correctly, Tom Brady signed a 10-year, $300 million contract with Fox last year when he retired, right? And the deal was as soon as he retires, he jumps into the number one spot for Fox, which presents a really interesting question. There is a clause in his contract where he can jump in whenever he wants. Some rumblings that he would like to do the Super Bowl this year on the number one team instead of Greg Olsen. What are your thoughts?
I don't think he would do that. I think that's just rumblings of people speculating because they heard about that in his contract, or maybe even told somebody, if I wanted to, I could do this. Tom Brady's really professional. He is all about preparation.
I agree.
He's got to know he's not good enough. And I think it's a mistake for Fox to replace Greg Olsen, quite frankly. I think this could go very badly for them. There's a difference between being a great player and being a great announcer. And how willing is Tom Brady going to be to call out other players and coaches? Maybe he will, but that's never been his public MO at all. I don't see Brady doing a Manning cast type deal either.
And I got to believe that this was a long year for Brady, that he's going to want to take the next 2, 3, 4 months to kind of reset. So while I think if he wanted to, I'm sure that he could jump right in and do this next week, but I would be shocked if he's doing anything Fox related for the Super Bowl.
I think Fox has a pretty good team with Burkhardt and Olsen. I would be loath if I were them to dissolve that. But would you rather see Brady in Olsen's chair?
Not this year. I think Olsen's been awesome.
Yeah, I do too. I'll tell you another guy that's really awesome in the broadcasting chair. You guys may not know him, but he wears Sunless Tanner for podcasts and a lot of 3/4 zips. That's Marcus Mosher. He's the host of Locked On Cowboys. He does it with Landon McCool. Landon knows a heck of a lot about the Cowboys. Give Landon a follow on Twitter. Also, Marcus covers the Raiders for USA Today, where he will not be covering Tom Brady signing with them. He will be covering the Raiders crawling on their hands and knees back to Derek Carr, asking for
forgiveness.
Yes. Marcus also writes for PFF.com. He is at Marcus_Mosher on Twitter. I'm at Harrison NFL on Twitter. We really appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you Monday night, and enjoy your weekend, everybody. Sans football.
Pro Bowl.